Okay, guys, I'm back. Sorry, I just thought, like, since I'm sitting here, I might as well turn my red light on and get my benefits of my red light therapy while I'm, like, talking. I might turn it off in a little while. I was just saying that I might as well just turn my red light on since I'm sitting here. Okay, so I'm gonna wait for everyone to join, and then I promise I'll answer your question. It's funny because I just see your Instagram username, and I wish I could call you guys all by your names. So I'm like, oh, Cha-Cha-Licious. I'm like, hey, Cha-Cha-Licious. But I know that, I believe your name is Tisha. I was just actually responding to your comment on Facebook before I had to go live, or in the Facebook group. So I wanted to kind of give you a more in-depth explanation. But her question on the last live, if I didn't get to any of your guys' questions, just letting you know that if you want to ask them again, please re-ask them. And I'm sorry for the red light. I just want to get some red light therapy right now. But she asked, is it common for constipation to happen post-coffee enema? She was going, before she started doing coffee enema, she was going twice a day, and now she's going once if she's lucky. So it's important, you guys, to know that not everything is for every person. I do want to explain what could possibly be happening, but at the same time, you want to use your common sense and your better judgment. You don't want to be reckless with your health, and if it's causing issues, it's causing issues. But we do have to understand that when we're moving things along, coffee enemas can flush out bacteria, they can flush out, pathogens, but they can also flush out our good bacteria, but they can also draw iron from the body. So that's why, like, people that do coffee enemas daily for like 6 months do have, and this is like more people that are doing them chronically every single day for like things like cancer, they do run the risk of sometimes developing anemia because coffee enemas draw iron to them out of the gut. Doing them once in a while or infrequently, unless you're like super anemic, I don't think it's going to be a problem, but it's more like we have to understand that they can be pulling heavy metals, iron, and things like that. Well, iron can actually constipate you, and what they pull out of the body can constipate you. So it's one of those things where if it's causing more harm than good, it's probably a good idea to just not do them, put a pause on them, and focus on other detoxification methods, because it is important to make sure you're going and having a bowel movement every single day. So again, it's one of those things where it's kind of a personal decision, but there's no need to be reckless or to do things that are making you uncomfortable or not really working out for you very, very well. But I have seen people that have like really bad like toxicity, heavy metal toxicity, lots of iron in their bodies, do coffee enemas, and like kind of struggle with constipation afterwards. Not really by my recommendation, just they did them on their own, or they did them with a doctor or a practitioner or something like that. And then they come to me and they're like, actually, like I can pinpoint a time when I started doing coffee enemas and then I started getting constipation after that. So it just kind of depends like on the person. But like I said, it's better to be safe than sorry always. They generally are pretty safe, but you never know. What are the baseline blood tests you recommend starting with to figure out what's going on with your body hormonally? For me personally, because I have a practice and, I have the ability to offer functional lab tests to my clients via the Dutch test, the GI map, and like mineral analysis and things like that. I personally hate having my clients fight for blood tests with their doctors because it's so difficult to get the right tests done. If you want to see something comprehensive, you really need to know your DHEA, your cortisol levels, your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone, and then you want to also, I think it's also helpful to have a full thyroid panel done. I think that if you're experiencing issues, a full thyroid panel is really, really helpful. I like the Dutch test personally because you can actually see what's happening with your hormones, how your body's metabolizing them and using them, and not just what they are, because so many times like a blood test is, and this is not to say blood tests are bad, it's just more like they're a snapshot in time, and what's going on in that bloodstream, or I call that hormone highway, is not always an accurate picture of what's going on all of the time, or what's going on in your tissues, which is kind of difficult to test unless you're going to like slice a piece of your skin off or your muscle or something and like test it under a microscope and look for hormones in it, like just one of those things where we have to kind of use the holistic perspective and look at all hormones at once, so we kind of can see a bigger picture. And I think it's really hard if we're just testing sex hormones, or we're just testing our thyroid, or we're just testing our stress hormones like cortisol. We don't really know like what is going on. So that was my long way of saying pregnenolone, DHEA, cortisol, estradiol, which is going to be your estrogen. Sometimes the other estrogens are helpful, which are estriol and estrone, progesterone, and what else? I think that's it. I think I covered it. So that's going to be the starting, and then, like I said, full thyroid panel. What would be great immune boosting tips? Biggest thing, keep your blood sugar balanced. Make sure you're eating enough. Make sure you're eating enough carbs. Make sure you're eating enough of the right fats, the right proteins. That's the first step. The second step is sometimes mushrooms can be very helpful. Things like reishi and cordyceps and things like that. There's a supplement. It's a mushroom blend. I believe it's called Myo Immunity that you can find on Amazon. I think that's the name of it. It's like a blend of mushrooms, and it's a brand that sells like encapsulated mushroom powders. There's a lot of people, if you read the reviews, that have used it for Lyme's disease. I personally don't have any clients that have used it for Lyme's, but I don't see the problem. There's a lot of other people that use proteolytic enzymes to break down biofilms. What's the name? It's called Inspired Nutrition. They have something called monolaurin pellets, and they have something called, I want to say like a biofilm busters. I remember looking through the reviews like 6 months ago and seeing like a lot of people say that they use it for their chronic Lymes, and it like has done wonders, except they like had to go really slow because it caused really bad die-off. Again, this is not a recommendation. It's just more of like me kind of pointing in the right direction to do your own research. But there are quite a bit of things that you can use for immunity. Some people use colostrum. Some people choose to like take antiviral herbs. But it's important to understand that there are immune uppers, so you don't want to keep your immune system on all the time. And then there are actual things that are going to suppress bacteria and viruses and things like that. So sometimes it takes a little trial and error, but I really like mushrooms for immune boosting. Things like elderberry are helpful, and then monolaurin can also be helpful. What is the phase in your period after about 15 days after ovulation? So after you ovulate, you're in the luteal phase because your corpus luteum that was made out of the emptied egg sac after your egg dropped for ovulation became the corpus luteum. And so that's your luteal phase all the way up until you have your period. And that is going to be your the beginning of your follicular phase, or which some period apps called your menstrual phase. Your menstrual phase is just the first half of your follicular phase. Technically, guys, only have 3 phases. Follicular phase, when the follicle is preparing for ovulation, ovulation itself, and then the luteal phase, where the corpus luteum is actually making you progesterone. That's kind of like an overly simplified way to say it. I think like all these period apps and like freaky people on Instagram that are like smearing their period blood all over their face, which like no hate if you do that, it's just weird to me, it's just they overcomplicate it. They're like, oh God, be like in tune with your spirit. And I'm like, just understand you have 3 phases and you bleed during the first half of one. That's all, and you can be as in tune with it as you want or not, it's your choice. It's Tony. Okay, now I'm going to remember Tony because sometimes, like I said, I can't see your guys' names sometimes, and I'm like, God, I want to call you by your name so bad. Is it normal to have breast lump and pain a week prior to your menstrual cycle? I'm also on Yasmin birth control. Does this contribute to a lump and pain? I can't say that that particularly contributes, but we know that estrogen can drive fibrocystic breasts, which is usually what lumps in breasts are called. But it's important, if you haven't gotten that lump checked out, make sure you do. If it's been obviously classified as benign, then that's something that obviously you can't worry about, but make sure that your doctor tells you it's a fibrocystic breast. Make sure you get that checked out. But a lot of times fibrocystic breasts are driven by estrogen issues and low progesterone, and if you're on birth control, you're probably not making any progesterone, and birth control is estrogenic, or it has synthetic estrogen in it, so it can cause those issues. But again, that's not to say it is. That's just kind of my speculation. But my biggest thing would be, if you feel a lump in your breast, you guys, please go get it checked out to make sure everything is okay. I am low in iron, high in ferritin, so points to inflammation, but I need iron for my thyroid. Suggestions. A lot of times, iron issues are due to cell issues. You don't have enough zinc, you don't have enough copper, etc. And if you have high ferritin, I would... Personally, for me, like, I just never think that iron supplements are safe to take because they just feed pathogens. Pure iron is just going to be pure food because that's what they eat. But that does not to say that all iron is bad. It's okay to get iron from your food. It's okay to get iron from like grass-fed beef liver and things like that. But keep in mind, you guys, that thyroid is needed to actually uptake iron into the cells properly. So you're saying like, oh, I need iron for thyroid, and I'm saying you need thyroid for iron. So that's usually the case. A hair strand test for food sensitivity, is this accurate? Probably not. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of food sensitivity tests in general. I think that they're kind of quacky a little bit because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm allergic to chicken and chia seeds and this and that. I'm like, of course you are. You have so much inflammation, so much estrogen, your thyroid's down. Your body can literally make an antibody out of against anything that leaks into your bloodstream. So if it says you're allergic to eggs, you could be allergic to eggs now, maybe. But you could have also reacted to them 8 years ago at one point in your life, and you still have the antibody against it. So I see a lot of women like restricting this long list of foods and truly don't feel that much better because it's not really doing anything except for just saying like, oh, you have an issue with proteins leaking into your bloodstream. Yeah, because your gut's inflamed, you have leaking, that type of thing. So that's just my personal opinion. I haven't really seen any good come from food sensitivity tests. Like, I've seen so many people run them and spend so much money on them and become like food fear orthorexics because of them. But I've never actually seen them be like, wow, this food sensitivity test like really served me. Loved your explanation in your stories today about using supplements before doing all the other steps first. I wasted so much money on supplements thinking it was the key. Yeah, me too. Like, I've gone through it all before I've worked with people, and then I just see people come to me like over and over again. They're like on this whole stack of supplements, like regimens. And honestly, like some of their issues that they're marking in their health history or their intake forms are like due to the supplements that they're taking. Like, I think that sometimes the supplements have made the issues worse. Testing showed low estrogen. Should I still do the carrot salad? Well, where's your progesterone at? Because sometimes progesterone is needed to mobilize estrogen, and then keep in mind that thyroid is as well. I know you said you're postmenopausal, I believe. I highly recommend researching or Googling the phrase repeat menopause. He talks about how all of your tissues still make estrogen as you go through menopause, but only your ovaries make progesterone in high amounts. And so in menopause, you very rarely have low estrogen, but in reality, because of low progesterone and low pregnenolone, you might not be mobilizing estrogen properly, detoxifying estrogen properly. So, because your ovaries are no longer making progesterone, you're no longer ovulating, you are no longer seeing estrogen show up. But is it truly low estrogen, or is it the other hormones that are low that are not mobilizing estrogen properly any longer? But keep in mind, you guys, when it comes to the raw carrot salad and carrots, your gallbladder is dumping out estrogen at the top of the small intestine to be detoxified. Your body has already mobilized and metabolized those hormones through the liver and into the gallbladder. You don't want estrogen that's been detoxified by the body to get back into the body and reabsorb. You still want estrogen that's been dumped into the small intestine to be bound to and carried out of the body, which is what the raw carrot salad will do. The raw carrot salad isn't like lowering your estrogen and like binding to all the estrogen in your body. It's just simply making sure that estrogen is not in a place where it doesn't belong, which is hanging around in the gut. I hope that makes sense. Coffee in the afternoon, feeling sluggish every day around 2. What'd you do in the first half of your day, girl? Are you getting less than like 700 calories? Are you getting sunlight? Are you moving your body? Or are you sedentary? Are you drinking too much water and flushing out all of your minerals by the time 2 p.m. rolls around, so your thyroid's starting to kind of like slow down? you got to kind of look at, when we're getting sluggish by 2 p.m., so many women come to me and they're like, oh God, like I have thyroid issues and, I have that afternoon crash. And I'm like, girl, you didn't even eat breakfast and you barely ate anything at lunch. You ate a little rabbit food salad and then you're tired. Of course you're tired, right? Like your body had to live its life all day long and eat itself for fuel and it's tired. So when it comes to sluggishness around 2 p.m., it can sometimes be other issues. Don't get me wrong. But you must first make sure you're eating breakfast within an hour of waking. Eat a snack at the 2-hour mark after breakfast. Eat a really filling lunch that's not too high in carbs, but has some sugar, has some protein, has some fat, and eat some food when you get sluggish. And tell me if you're still sluggish after a week of that. A lot of times you're not. If you are, then it could be other issues like adrenals, or you're not sleeping well, or you got low progesterone or hormonal issues. But so many times it's just the fact that you drank coffee on an empty stomach when you woke up, you started your day in a deficit, and you've pushed yourself into a further deficit. And this dominoes every single day, right? You get home, you binge because you're starving, you starved yourself all day, you eat a huge meal, you're like, oh God, I've never seen food in my life. And then you still didn't get enough calories that day, right? So you go to bed, your body's starving. By the time you wake up, your liver's empty of sugar. It's gone. So your body is now eating itself for fuel using cortisol and adrenaline. Then you go to drink some coffee on an empty stomach and boom, that pushes the gas pedal and you're pushing the gas pedal, but there's no wheels on those tires. There is no oil, there is nothing. There is no gas in that tank. And so you have just now pushed yourself into further depletion. Of course, you're getting tired by 2 p.m. because now you're just in this constant state of depletion. So that was a long answer for eat some more damn food, and try that first. Where do you get your raw milk? I know you're local, so I personally get mine at either Organic Roots or Barron's. Sprouts has it too. So I get it there. But keep in mind, you guys, that raw milk, because it has a lot more bacteria present, keep in mind that pasteurized milk still has some bacteria in it, but like ultra pasteurized doesn't. Depending on the season, sometimes cows can eat things that make the milk taste kind of gross and funny. The bacteria is what determines the flavor of the milk. And so just recently I bought a gallon and the taste, the flavor, like I drank it because it's super expensive, but I was just like, oh God. So I actually had to buy some organic pasteurized milk just because I'm like, whatever the cows are eating right now, it is disgusting. Like I cannot handle their bacteria. So I still do that. The only thing that's important is making sure your milk is non-homogenized and high quality. Some people, I should preface that by saying that some people can tolerate homogenized milk just fine. The problem with the homogenized milk, the only thing that's wrong with it is they're pushing those fat globules, through these like oxygen chambers to mix the protein, the casein protein, and the fat so that the fat does not collect at the top of your milk. But what happens is by pushing oxygen into the milk, you can actually when you're drinking it, you're putting oxygen into your gut. And if you saw my story yesterday, we don't want oxygen in our gut, and that can cause gas and bloating and lactose intolerance, So if homogenized milk really bloats you or makes you feel nasty, that's why. But as long as it's organic and regardless if it's raw or not, it can be good. Have you heard of Wilson's syndrome? Thoughts on it? I've heard of it, but honestly, I'm not really sure the ins and outs of it. So I don't have a notebook right now. If you send me a DM and just say hey girl, in your live I asked about Wilson's syndrome, it will remind me to do a little bit more research on it. But I know it's not the same as hyperthyroidism, but I remember reading an article on it, but I don't know everything, you guys, and I'm really, really sorry. I know it's funny, for my personality, I'm I wish I knew about it because I want to talk about it, but I know can't possibly know everything. But when you guys mention something that I don't know, I will definitely look it up. Okay, so because IZ Marshmallow says I'm Zainab, Zainab. I like hearing your guys' names, and I want to know how to pronounce that. Is it normal to have an IUD and very normal trackable period? It's been in for 4 years and I can track to the day. It's a 3-day healthy, non-painful period, and my funk has confirmed everything is correctly in place. Yeah, it's totally possible to have a period, like a trackable period, especially if you ovulate. You can ovulate while you're on the hormonal IUD. Usually, the biggest, I guess, barrier to ovulation on IUDs is usually happening in the first year, because when your hormonal IUD is new, it's secreting a lot more levonorgestrel or progestins, which is that fake progesterone, than when it's 4 years old. And so a lot of women do ovulate on the IUD. They just don't ovulate as much, or it's not common to ovulate that first year, or they'll ovulate sporadically. But it is totally possible to ovulate and have a trackable period on the IUD. It's just super important, you guys, to check in with your progesterone levels, because progestins are not the same as progesterone, and they do deplete you of a lot of nutrients, and they do have the whole goal with a hormonal birth control or IUD is to deplete you of the nutrients you need to make a healthy corpus luteum. So you can't, you can't make progesterone, and so therefore you can't sustain a pregnancy. So it just is important to understand that you're going to be depleted of a little bit more nutrients. So you got to make sure you're being really careful, like implementing nutrients into your diet, and then just making sure you're making enough progesterone. But hormonal IUDs, I mean, even though like I personally am not like a huge fan of synthetic hormones, I think they're a way better option than like taking the birth control pill, which just completely shuts down your cycle. So a lot of women have like a pretty okay cycle on a hormonal IUD. Queen, I love you, Sabrine. I hope you're doing so well. Sabrine is my client. My husband loves you because ice cream is okay in our household now. Yes, I've heard this so many times. It's so hilarious, you guys. They're like, honestly, like my husband doesn't understand a word you say, but they do understand that you say ice cream's okay, and they love you for it. I come from high fat, low carb, and had cut dairy out too. So happy to enjoy yummy food without guilt. I'm so excited. I love that you guys are enjoying your experience. And honestly, like there are some people that are still kind of triggered by like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she says ice cream's okay. Like, oh, sugar's not the devil. And I bet from your experience, girl, like you probably see that allowing ice cream, which is simply just, if it's like actually properly high quality, it's just cream, milk, egg yolks, sugar. It's very simple, right? And allowing it allows us to feel super empowered about our food and in control of our food. Like I no longer feel like I have to like scarf down a pint really quick, because it's like a psychological like, oh my God, I'm like so guilty right now. I'm just gonna eat this whole damn thing, and I'm starving. First of all, like my cells are starving. It no longer like really calls to me from the freezer. Like there are days where I'm like, yeah, I crave some ice cream right now, and I have it like at 11 a.m. sometimes. Like I'm like, man, I want some ice cream for a snack. But it's never like, oh God, I gotta eat the whole pint. You know, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna serve some for a snack and move on with my life. And for me, like where a pint maybe would last like a day before, now sometimes a pint will last me like a week, because it's just like I feel super empowered around it. Okay, hey girl, so this is, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right, Zainab, oh God, I'm sorry. Okay, so today we had talk, my professor and I, about nuts and seeds and kale, and he kept saying they were healthy, and since being on Fully Nourished, I disagreed with him that in excess they are not. You know, guys, it's one of those things where when, I teach you on Fully Nourished, this is, kind of contrary to popular belief. This is like, years and years of nutrition conditioning into these people that have been just convinced, like they completely believe it. There's nothing wrong with them. I think it's just like in their evolution and their, experience, they've come to the terms that those things are okay. And until their experience proves them wrong or asks them to question everything that they believed, which some people can never do, right? Some people can never question the beliefs that they've set up in their mind to their own demise, right? Like they end up suffering because they cannot let go of their beliefs. But some people do. We evolve and we change, right? Like for me, for example, I was so tied to paleo and even keto and low carb. And for me, like opening up this world of like, wow, I'm just looking at science. I'm just looking at biology and like what my cells need. And it's like, oh, I understand now. Like kale is an above ground vegetable, and it's very hard to digest, and it's hard to absorb the nutrients from, and it's not a superfood. It just is something that, like an inedible leaf that some people eat sometimes. And when properly prepared, it can provide a lot of nutrients if it's put into a broth or sauteed really heavily in some butter, but it's not something that needs to be a staple. And it's the same thing for nuts and seeds. They can have some really nice proteins. They have some arginine in them. They have vitamin E in them. But we don't want to be pounding them all day because they are the food that, put bears into hibernation and squirrels into hibernation, and eating in excess amounts is just not going to support our goals. But, some people just put a lot of faith and belief into what other people tell them and accept it as fact, and they're going to have to learn the hard way, and it's like one of those things where it's so amazing, and I'm so proud of you for like politely disagreeing, but at the same time, we also have to acknowledge, like, I don't even want to have a debate with someone that doesn't even know what I know now. And sometimes you just have to experience to know. Like, some people are just, I call them like science hoes. Like, they just are like, show me the science. And I'm like, I can show you the science, but you can also probably show me the science. And science is like, pretty relative on the person running the science, who's, buying the science, who's trying to sell what, why is the science study even being done? What science is this based on? There's a previous study that this science is being based on. There's assumptions being made. So it's just overall, like, I'm like, science is important, but, there's a difference between science and just, like, arrogance and misinformation. And, it's hard. I try not to debate. And if people, like, don't want to agree, like, that's fine. That's coming from their experience. But I'm not going to try to, like, convince anyone. I think I, like, inherently know, like, my tongue when I touch kale is, like, that's disgusting. Like, I don't want to touch that thing again. And when I see it come out on the other end, it's also not something that I think, like, wow, I'm extracting so many nutrients from that food. You got me there, Like, no, that literally passed through me undigested. And that might be TMI, but it's just, like, how I see things. Have a friend that is so skeptical about getting off of birth control because her doc convinced her it is the only thing that will help her endometriosis. How can I help her see otherwise? Endometriosis is one of those things that is really approached, it can be a really, like, I don't want to say life-threatening, because there's so many women that think, like, they're like, oh, I've had, like, women come to me, or I've heard doctors tell me that they're like, yeah, women have come to me and people told them that it was, like, an illness that was going to cause them death. Like, there's a lot of fear-mongering going on in medicine, and I really don't respect that. I think it's important to get a few different opinions, and it's always based on, like, what doctor you're going to, first of all. I also think it's important to understand endometriosis a little more. Like, there really isn't a lot of understanding in medicine what causes it. So in my opinion, that's like, oh, well, if you don't know what drives my condition, then why do you think, like, why are you saying this will work? Like, it shuts off symptoms, but, like, no, like, what does it help me with? We know that endometriosis has a lot to do with gut bacteria, right? So endotoxins are being created by bacteria and fungus. Endometriosis, right? So I've heard some seminars and some doctors lecture on talking about how endometriosis responds really well to antibacterials, things like berberine, which shows us, it's like a correlation, like, okay, if a condition is responding very, very well to antibacterials, that might be that it has something to do with bacteria, right? And so I know that bacteria creates endotoxins, and endometriosis is very similar, right? Has a lot to do with fibrosis or scarring of the tissue. And it also has a lot to do with estrogen, you guys. And so many women with endometriosis already have deficiencies in progesterone. And then obviously when you go on birth control, it shuts down ovulation, and so you no longer make progesterone. And so it can kind of shut down, like, when we shut down the cycle, we sometimes see all of our symptoms cease because an imbalanced cycle was the cause of the problem. But was that really, was shutting down the cycle the right thing? It's like saying, like, that person got hurt over there, we're just going to shut down this whole party, this whole business, everything. We're just, that one person got hurt, like, we're shutting it all down. And it's like, no, like, why don't we ask, like, why this person got hurt over here? Let's fix the issue. Like, like, it just, to me, it's a very, like, I guess I see a lot of barbaric practices. It's just like, oh, that one thing's malfunctioning, shut it all down. Or like, oh, that organ's not working, rip it out, let's remove it. And it's just like, yeah, sometimes it's necessary, but sometimes people have very clear issues driving it. But, however, I don't think you can convince someone, especially if they, like, really, really trust their doctor. And but I do recommend that you recommend her a book called The Period Repair Manual by Lara Bryden. It is a very empowering book. It talks about the cycles. It talks about endometriosis. She talks about PCOS. She talks about hormones in a really empowering way. And I think that I recommend it to a lot of women who just don't really understand cycles, don't really understand progesterone, don't understand estrogen. They just don't understand birth control in general. She really talks about what birth control is doing to your body. Like, what is birth control doing to your body? And makes it very clear that, like, she's not saying anything against birth control. She's just educating you on what birth control does. And it's very much like, how is that going to help me? You know what I mean? Like, she explains it to you to the point where it's like, how's that going to help me? And, you know, it kind of like, women are very smart. You know, we know, like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense to us. That gives me a gut check. And at that point, we can kind of make a more empowered decision. Okay, so progesterone is also low, testosterone a little high. Yeah, so in menopausal women, that's definitely, like, very common. So my kind of encouragement is get those progesterone levels up first, and then wait like a couple months and then see what happens with estrogen. My mom's menopausal and I help her with stuff, and what we realized is that you implement progesterone because you're no longer making enough progesterone, and sure enough, estrogen starts mobilizing. And so you retest the blood in 3 to 6 months and, oh, my estrogen levels are higher. Sometimes they're not in that normal range, and that's, you know, up to you what to do with it, but so many times women's estrogen production is a lot higher than they think it is, but it's not moving from the tissues because the tissues are what's making it, but the progesterone is responsible for mobilizing it and getting it out of the body. I hope that makes sense. Do you mind linking me to some resources? Yeah, so I'm going to send you to Ray Peat's website. He has a few articles on unstable fats, and you can look at that. Cows Eat Grass is another one of my favorite blogs. It's not as much science-based, but he can, like, link some resources and give you some really good points, like debate points. And then I'm trying to think what else. Those are some good places to start. What are the symptoms of low progesterone, or what are the symptoms of high androgens? Is it common to have both? Yeah, it's common to have both for sure, because progesterone keeps androgens in check, and progesterone is also an anti-stress hormone, girls. So we understand that if we have lots of stress in our body, cortisol, you know, whether we're not eating enough, we're over-exercising, we're not taking care of ourselves, we have high stress, we have higher needs for progesterone, and progesterone is going to be that anti-stress hormone. So if we have high stress, keep in mind that cortisol's main job is to break your tissues down in order to provide fuel under stress, right? And so there are certain tissues in your body that your body wants to protect from that. And testosterone and DHEA are protective against breakdown of tissues. So that's why your brain is really high in DHEA and testosterone, your heart tissue, your lung tissue, because your body doesn't want you to break those down under stress until you must. So that's a long way of saying that androgens are high because of stress, and progesterone is an anti-stress hormone. So yes, progesterone being low can sometimes cause androgens to be high just due to not having enough progesterone to block stress hormones. Random question, but I have 2 warts on my hands that move locations sometimes to different fingers. I've heard that warts and Epstein-Barr virus are commonly connected. Is this true? I think so. I haven't been able to find like enough research from it, but I used to struggle with warts, and I actually had one wart that I still remember. I was like, it's so weird because I can like almost feel it in a sense. Like, it's so weird because I like remember the feeling so strongly, but I used to have one huge wart on my finger, like all growing up, like when I was a teenager and into my early 20s when I was struggling with like post-birth control syndrome and all of that. And I swear, like, I tried everything. Like, I got it frozen off. I had the compound W, like tea tree oil, apple cider vinegar, everything. And the only thing that helped me out was getting my gut issues figured out. And we know now that like viral issues do, you know, when your gut is dysfunctional and your metabolism is dysfunctional and your hormones, your body's stressed out, you know, and then your gut's not functioning properly, of course viruses are going to have kind of that step up. They have a leg in. They kind of are bothering you a lot more than they would if your immune system was strong. So it would totally make sense for me, just like my experience, like getting rid of warts by just like getting my gut and my hormones a lot more balanced, is just like mind-boggling to me. And it really took forever. Like I used to like just try to like cut it off, you know. I was like, this is disgusting, like I hate it. But now I kind of realize like, okay, it does have some type of viral connection. I don't know about Epstein-Barr, like I haven't really looked into that research as much, but I wouldn't doubt it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. My name is Cecilia. Yes. Okay. So I got Cecilia. I got Zainab, and I'm Kurdish. Oh, cool. Okay. Yes. So Zainab I was close, but not, no cigar. How good is FAM for natural birth control, and what are your tips for when you first transition off the pill? So FAM is going to be, so it's kind of one of those things where the fertility awareness method is going to be as good as you are. If you're kind of irresponsible with it or you don't really understand it, it can be really scary. It's like one of those things where like you have a dog and you're scared of the dog understands that you're scared of it, and it's like, okay, I'm going to take a hold of you. So you have to really understand your body, you guys. You only ovulate, there's 1 egg per month that's available to be fertilized, right? It's available for 24 hours before it shrivels up and dies. Sperm can last in the body for 5 to 7 days. So of course, you don't want sperm to be present when that egg drops, or hi, how are ya? So you want to make sure that you understand that your fertile window is, the 5 to 7 days before you ovulate, and then the 24 hours that you have that egg. So you do need to understand when you ovulate. For fertility awareness method, it takes a few months for you to understand your ovulation patterns. Most women ovulate on the same day every month, and they start to see the symptoms correlated, but it does take a few months of tracking to really understand that. And so you do have to be careful while you don't quite understand your body yet. You don't have to be fearful, you just need to be careful. And then once you kind of understand the patterns of your body, you can track it a lot more. I don't want to say loosely, that's not the right word. It's just more like you trust your body a lot more. You're like, okay, I get this now. So fertility awareness method is like, I don't know the percentage. It's like, I think 96%. There's a lot of information on the internet that's trying to like scare the shit out of you, but I want to say like if you do it right, it's like 96%, and different methods are different percentages. And then like what you use during your fertile window is also going to determine, like some people are like, they really can't have a baby, so they use like spermicide and condoms. Some people are just like pull out, like everyone's different. So it's really dependent on you. But we need to remember that unless birth control is taken properly, so a lot of people say like, yeah, birth control is 99.9% effective or something like that. Only if you take it properly, meaning the same time, every single day in the same way. If you do not take it that way, your birth control pill is only 91% effective. A lot of women are like taking it like, I forgot to take my pill today, whatever, or they're like taking it at a different time every day, or some days they eat and some days they don't. And I'm like, then you are only at that 91%. You are not at that 99.9%. So a lot of women think they're a lot safer than they are. With that being said, it's kind of dependent on what you use, how you do it, how much information you have. Some women just really like using the Daisy tracker. Some women like using natural cycles. Some women like using OvuSense. I think all of those are really good methods. I've been meaning, I haven't gotten around to it yet, to try Temp Drop for tracking my temperatures, my morning waking temperatures. I just haven't gotten around to it. I just use an old school thermometer and the Kendara app, but I'm just old school like that. I'm not super stressed about it. Help with hot flashes after sugary dessert. I thought I was post-meno. Ugh, what's happening? Can menopause go away and come back? If you had a sugary dessert, like what else was in the sugary dessert? So many people say like, oh, it's the sugar. And I'm like, what else was in there? Like, was there crap in there? Was there inflammatory additives? Was there polyunsaturated fats? Like, what else was in there? And if you don't have enough protein in your diet, you can spike your blood sugar really quickly, and then it'll just drop and then you have to increase adrenaline and cortisol to break down your own tissues to make blood sugar, to keep blood sugar stable. So best way, you guys, is to eat good food. Don't eat crap. Even if it's sugar, it shouldn't be combined with a bunch of other junk. It's probably not the sugar, it's probably the junk. And then on top of it, make sure you're also eating some protein and fat with it. You're not just eating a sugary thing. Because if a dessert is just all carbohydrates, it's going to spike your blood sugar, and then it's going to come back down, and then your body has to make its own sugar, and it does that using stress hormones that are going to give you hot flashes. Jude. What is your name is Jude. I was like, okay, Jude. I love it. Okay, so I got Jude. I got to go back through. What is your favorite vegetable besides carrot? You guys, I used to be someone that just pounded vegetables, and I did it because I was a sick individual, and I was hedonistic, meaning that, like, I thought that I was eating them because they were good for me, but they weren't really doing a lot of good for me. So I personally don't eat a ton of vegetables anymore, not as many as all the other nutritionists on Instagram probably, but just because, like, I only eat what I enjoy. And if I'm honest with myself, I have an aversion to cruciferous vegetables. Like, people are like, I love broccoli, and I'm like, I didn't eat it for a month, and now I can't even stand it. So it's like, I personally love carrots. I love squashes. If we're gonna count root vegetables, I love sweet potatoes, yucca, parsnips. I love all root vegetables. They're so good when you roast them or make them kind of crispy or turn them into a hash brown. Oh, so good. Trying to think, I like yellow squash or zucchini. I do like salads periodically. I'm not anti-greens. I just don't do a lot of them when I'm in the mood for them. Sometimes I'll do a nice soup. I love stews and soups that have are creamy bases, and I'll put carrots, squash. Sometimes I'll put peas. What else will I put in there? Sometimes I'll put some greens in there if I'm feeling it, not always feeling it. Some red cabbage, some cabbage. But yeah, I mix it up. I think my favorite would be zucchini if cooked correctly, or I really love carrots, so I'm oh God, what else do I eat besides carrots? Sweet potatoes, parsnips. I'm really enjoying parsnips. Do you offer meal plans? Yes, I have a meal plan in my online program, Fully Nourished, but I don't offer just meal plans. I guess I could at one point, but people ask me that all the time. That's what it has me thinking. I'm I guess I could offer meal plans, but I think it's important to understand why you're eating what you're eating, and it's not just about oh, I need someone to set out a meal plan for me. It's more I need to understand my food so that I can do this on my own, be empowered around my food. Dealing with dental issues, any tips on healing foods or minerals I need to be paying attention to? Yeah, so minerals in general, magnesium, calcium, potassium, and sodium. Zinc is important, and then fat-soluble vitamins. One of the biggest deficiencies, especially if there's gut issues involved, is vitamin K. And vitamin K, oh sorry, I thought I saw a spider here, and I was what the heck? Vitamin K is so important for allowing the mineralization of a tooth, and then believe it or not, sunlight. So synthesizing your own vitamin D from the sun is important. Yeah, you can totally take vitamin D, but it's not the same, you guys, and sometimes taking vitamin D can cause more problems, more harm than good. So getting vitamin D from the sun is really important. And then the other fat solubles vitamin A and E. Can you comment about high cholesterol on labs and what it relates back to usually? Yeah, scroll down in my feed a little bit. I did a post on it couple months ago, how high cholesterol, remember that you guys, that steroids or hormones are all made from cholesterol. So you've got cholesterol, and then your body makes a hormone called pregnenolone, which we call the mother hormone. Pregnenolone then turns into cortisol, progesterone, or DHEA. Usually all three in a healthy person, but sometimes it'll convert only into cortisol, very little into progesterone, or whatever. And then if it converts into DHEA, then DHEA can turn both into estrogen or testosterone, or both. And estrogen can turn into testosterone, and testosterone can turn into estrogen. They can be aromatized, which means they can be transferred into different hormones. So when you have high cholesterol, there's a problem with conversion, right? If cholesterol is not converting into pregnenolone, there's a problem with that conversion. And why is that? Thyroid issues. Your body needs vitamin A and proper thyroid function in order to convert cholesterol to pregnenolone. And sometimes people with low metabolisms or low thyroid, or just their thyroid's not working, they'll see that they have really high cholesterol levels, and it's because of that. They're not converting those into their sex hormones. Yes, exactly. I'm so fortunate. I got to be empowered with golden information by a brilliant person like you. You guys are so sweet. What's a good antifungal? Like, do you mean just taking internally? Antifungals can be helpful, but they're kind of like a Band-Aid solution, but they can be helpful if you have like some type of like acute yeast infection or something. I personally like undecylenic acid by Thorne, undecylenic acid. Caprylic acid is also helpful, like MCT oil. Oregano oil is helpful. Yeah, those are gonna kind of be my 3 along with garlic. Megan says, I have PCOS and want to get my IUD removed after reading Beyond the Pill, but my gyno said I need it because of my risk of uterine cancer due to my PCOS. Do you know much about that? Yeah, I've heard that before. I'm not going to say it's BS, but I'm going to probably say it's BS, you know? Just saying. Okay, so I'm really going to say that the biggest thing is what's not understood about PCOS is like your uterine lining builds up because of estrogen, right? And keep in mind that polycystic ovarian syndrome can be a condition where you're not ovulating. That doesn't mean you can't ovulate. It just means that there are barriers that are keeping your body from dropping an egg. Your body does not feel safe enough to reproduce because there's metabolic issues happening. So if you're not ovulating, you're not making progesterone. Progesterone is responsible for thinning the uterine lining, right? Keeping the uterine lining at a healthy thickness, not too thick, which is caused by estrogen, and not too thin, which is caused by excess progesterone. Okay, so if we know that, people say like, oh, PCOS causes uterine cancer, and it's like, no, not ovulating, which can happen in PCOS, but doesn't have to, can cause the uterine lining to build up, which, if not thinned by progesterone, can cause issues down the line. That is a far stretch between X plus Y equals Z, like PCOS causes uterine cancer. I personally have seen a lot of women not on any type of hormonal birth control that are doing just fine. And what does she say about the fact that hormonal birth control is tied to uterine cancer? What about those studies? You know what I mean? It's just like, I hate when people do that, like, oh, this is, this causes this. Like, no, let's look at what happens, what could maybe drive that. And I'm not saying, like, don't listen to your doctor. I think it's important to take their opinion and to, but also to take the research and to get another opinion, get a second opinion. If it doesn't sit right with you, that's not their choice to make. They're just there to be your partner in health and to educate you. And that doesn't sound like someone who educates. Like, that sounds like someone who fearmongers a little bit. So overall, it's just important to trust your gut in situations like that and look at this true research and the true science. But yeah, it's just really, it's heartbreaking to me. Thank you, Jess. You're so amazing and such a gifted teacher. Oh, I appreciate it, you guys. I love you guys. Breastfeeding and coffee enemas, I would refrain for sure. I don't think that any powerful detoxification strategies should be done during breastfeeding, just because you're really releasing a lot of that into the milk. And of course, there are a lot of things that the body can filter from the milk, but I just think just because it's such a delicate time and, your child's so small, and it's one of those things where it's like, it's only a period of time, I think it's best, I personally would not do coffee enemas while breastfeeding, just because whatever gets released, I don't want that to be transferred to my child. My daughter has seen a functional medicine doctor. She is on a SIBO protocol, SIBO protocol along with hormone balancing supplements. Once the SIBO protocol is done, is that it? She's been told she has to be on the hormone supplements. She also has PCOS. Yeah, if you didn't watch my story on SIBO yesterday, I'm going to post it in my highlight stories. I think that would be important for you to watch. And then it's important to understand that SIBO is caused by a slow metabolism. So when you have slow metabolism or dysregulated metabolism, lots of stress in the body, things are going to move slowly through the digestive tract, and that's going to cause fermentation and bacteria in a place where that doesn't belong. So is SIBO a cause or is an effect? It will continue to return a lot of times if it's not the issue is not dealt with. But yeah, I'm not sure what, I guess the question is is that it? Is SIBO protocol? It's not usually it, just because the root of the issue is not being dealt with, but sometimes it can be. Some people do SIBO protocols and they feel fine afterwards. They feel great. Thank you. I'm beginning to understand my body more and wanting to move forward with removing it. I'm really appreciative. Okay, Lakin says, I missed the answer to high cholesterol. I pretty much just said that high cholesterol is a lot of times caused by thyroid issues because cholesterol is not able to convert into hormones. Keep in mind that cholesterol is the building block to hormones, so that's usually what's happening. And keep in mind that thyroid and vitamin A are both needed to convert cholesterol into pregnenolone. What do you think about spraying magnesium on the scalp for hair growth? I guess it's worth a try. Like, I don't see, like, why it would be a problem. I just think it's more of, like, one of those things where it might work, it might not. But I don't see, like, it wouldn't be, like, damaging or anything like that. It's pretty, and it's good for you. Like, it allows you to absorb magnesium into your skin. Is a salt lamp in the bedroom okay, or should I remove it to get complete darkness? I thought I had heard that we have a stress response in the dark and may not sleep as well. I think it's kind of dependent. So it's really crazy because there's a lot of like people and research, and I previously had the stance of like, make sure everything's completely dark. And that's what I do teach in Fully Nourished, because most people sleep better when they are in complete darkness. But I did kind of learn, like, not recently, I kind of heard and I've kind of like dug more into it, but I need to do more research, that because darkness puts us in kind of a vulnerable position as human beings, meaning that like in the dark we can't see, we're not like good survivalists, we're kind of our bodies like want to be in a safe environment, and light, like firelight, would be protective, right? Because we can actually see if something's coming to hunt us or kill us, like we would be able to see it, whereas like complete darkness is not that way. And so I was kind of like, that kind of makes sense, right? And so I've heard of people that like have really bad cortisol like response, like adrenal issues or like really bad stress issues. They have it worse at night, like they get a racing heart or they can't sleep very well. And so using an incandescent light or a Himalayan pink salt lamp, not a LED light, heaven forbid, blue light, but like an incandescent light, which is technically a red light, like it has like incandescent light rays, it keeps the stress response down. So I have like started to do a little research on that. I'm like, that's really interesting. Like, I'm not really sure how true it is, and I understand that like moonlight and like low level lights can sometimes help people sleep. So I think it's just kind of like your own opinion, like how, if you sleep well. I gotta turn this off, sorry. I sometimes like, that red light is harsh. So I think it's like really personal for you. So what you feel is best. Hey Jess, not sure if I should post my question here or on the questions tab, but I'm just wondering if you have any advice to overcome carb fear, keto for 1.5 years, and scared of gaining, but miss hummus and red potatoes. Well, we have to understand, you guys, that carb fear is partially some type of disordered eating. I guess we can't say like it's an eating disorder. You have to kind of be diagnosed with that, but we can say it's disordered eating. So we have literally allowed outside information to override our biological programming. And I want you guys to keep in mind that keto is an override of biological programming. Low carb diets are very stressful. The way that they cause us to lose weight is through adrenaline and cortisol. We eat through our tissues very quickly. We really destroy our metabolism. And so when we go, there's now studies coming out that shows it causes hepatic insulin resistance, meaning liver insulin resistance, and it really kind of changes our gut microbiome, kind of like if you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. So there are certain strains of bacteria that used to help us digest carbs properly and regulate our metabolism that is now gone. So it's not necessarily that the carbs are going to be the problem. It's going to be how the body responds to the carbs, depending on like how much damage was done, how low carb it was. It just kind of depends. But I think it's important. The biggest mistake that people make is the minute that they eat carbs, they are just like, oh my gosh, their body just craves carbs. And this is not because you're carb addicted. This is because your body's like, finally, I get the fuel that I like to run on. Your body prefers to run on glucose, not fat. Not fat. You don't burn fat for fuel. Your body will make as much sugar for fuel before it burns fat for fuel, because burning fat for fuel is very stressful. It's a stressful process. Ketosis is a survival mechanism. It is only something humans go into in the most cold winter months when they didn't have access to fresh fruit or preserves or anything like that. There was no sugar available, and so they had to rely on meat and fat, and they had to hunt, and that was going to be what they ran on. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's healthy, and it's kind of a hibernation state. Our body is in almost like a hibernation, like your body's conserving as much energy as possible. None of that to scare you. It's more understanding what we've done when we go keto or low carb to our body. We've really forced our body to burn a fuel that it does not prefer, and it's almost like an adaptation syndrome. So we have to move back. We have to choose almost. And when it comes to like red potatoes and hummus, for example, I think that's like you can, if you like really want to stay in ketosis or something, you could tie in some red potatoes and hummus and like still be in ketosis. It's really interesting because a lot of people get ketosis really wrong. A lot of people that eat high-fat, low-carb diets are actually not in proper ketosis. They're just on a high-fat, low-carb diet, and they're eating their tissues themselves. Most people are not running on fat properly. And so when you implement carbs back in, your body's like, finally. But depending on the state of your gut, which is usually pretty rough when you first tie carbs back in, it's so important to just go very gradually, very slowly, like small servings in small amounts, spread out over the course of a week. Like the biggest mistake that people make is too hard, too fast. And keep in mind that you force your body to run on a certain fuel source for how long? And then you can't just expect it to run on a different fuel source for just all of a sudden right away. You have to kind of like slowly get your body back adapted. So my biggest recommendations is don't fear carbs, fear why your body was not responding to carbs properly in the first place, which is probably insulin resistance, and that's due to gut inflammation and liver issues and high estrogen, low testosterone, stress, cortisol. And so those issues on keto were probably not fixed. Just because you lost weight doesn't mean that those hormonal issues are fixed. And so it's one of those things where the root cause of the problem hasn't been probably fixed. And so you need to be very slow. And sometimes, and I'll be honest, this is not to scare, but I've seen every single woman that comes to me on a low carb diet has made themselves more insulin resistant. Their insulin levels are like worse than when they were on the standard American diet. So it's just important to kind of pay attention to how your body responds to carbs and do it very, very slowly. But I highly recommend checking out the work of Danny Roddy and specifically listening to the podcast that he recorded with, I think his name is Kyle. He's a PhD in biochemistry, and he talks about why ketosis is a state that you don't want to be in, and then they talk about some tips as to getting to be better carb or sugar burners instead, which was probably the problem in the first place, why you would gain so much weight. And hummus and red potatoes are really not that high in like carbs or sugar. I'm really enjoying your diet coming out of keto. Thank you so much. I'm so appreciative. Like, I'm so glad that you're feeling good and that you're enjoying it. I think it's like so important that you just take it slow and you pay attention to your body, but I'm so excited for you. And I think it's like really easy to make it your own. And for me, like that was kind of the process that I took coming out of keto myself, so low carb, I went like paleo for a long time, then low carb, then keto, and then like destruction occurred, like, and then I had to like restore myself. So for me, it was very empowering and helpful as well. Which one do you prefer? Wild yam liquid extract or cream? I prefer a liquid extract, honestly. Creams can sometimes leave some on your skin, which can sometimes be absorbed slowly, and it can sometimes lead to too much, where I feel like a liquid, you can really like adjust the dosage and like really target it. I just feel like drops are a little easier to titrate, meaning that you can find your perfect dosage, whereas like creams, it's hard to like get it titrated. Dr. G. Willett, I'm sorry if I like didn't call you the right thing. That makes so much sense. Thank you. Just wanting to introduce more carb heavy foods like healthy starches and lentils. Yeah, like garbanzo beans and red potatoes, like those are not going to be a problem, especially if you're not like having like a huge serving in one sitting. There's a lot of people on keto that eat hummus as one of their like protein sources, so it really isn't that high in carbs. Garbanzos are kind of high in protein. Okay guys, Instagram's cutting me off in a minute, so if any like last call for questions come in, I'll probably be able to answer like one or two maybe more, but I try to end it before Instagram cuts me off because they always like delete my lives. So if you guys have any more questions, last call for questions. Sorry, God. And then I will put this up, and you guys can watch it for the next 24 hours. I also am going to put up the live from last Wednesday. I have, like, last Friday's live did not save. It's been a disaster. It's been, like, a stressful part of, like, my existence. I'm like, God, Instagram, get your stuff together. But I will be taking it over to the good old tube so we can spend some more time together and you guys can watch it forever. But I appreciate you guys. Love you, Alyssa. And keep in mind, you guys, if you like these lives, I also go live at 9 a.m. and I'm happy to take requests like in the DMs before if you can't make it and you're like, I really want you to answer this question, and I will try to do my best to answer it in the live so you guys can watch it later. But I love you guys. I'll see you soon, and I hope you have a good night.